Okay, welcome to our MaxSold expert webinar series. We're just going to wait a few minutes while our Facebook Live attendees join us. In the meantime, we have a quick poll that will come up on the screen in a moment. Getting to know you. How do you rate your level of purpose in the world? Got a lot of people at 8. One person. If you're just joining us from Facebook, thank you so much for joining us, our MaxSold expert webinar series. And today we have a poll that you can join in on. We'll have a few polls throughout. We also would love to welcome Kelly O'Connor in Denver, Colorado. She is Legacy Life Coach, editor of the Certified Senior Advisors Journal, and also a former speaker at the TEDx Berry Creek event in Denver. We're very excited to have her here today. And thank you, Kelly. I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather. I am so excited to be here. I cannot wait to see the results of all the polls. So I hope that everyone, as they're joining, will make sure and join us there. But we're here today to talk about the longevity lifestyle. And it's interesting. I've been in the senior care, senior living industry for about 10 years now. And over the years, we've seen a lot of people changing the verbiage that they're using about senior care and senior living. And, the interesting thing is they used to call us years ago aging services. But the funny thing about aging services is we're aging from the day that we're born. And so why is aging considered at the later part of life? And so we've really been working with the terminology in the industry. And not that terminology means much, but I think that our words do have power. And so what we've seen is a lot of people using the term longevity to mean those that are living into their 80s, 90s, 100s and beyond. So we're going to talk today about the longevity lifestyle. And this is a lifestyle that will allow us to have a very contented and long life. Many people think that the longevity lifestyle is about what they do in their 80s and 90s. But I say that the longevity lifestyle is really about what we do in our earlier years. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me close the poll there. I'm glad everyone's voting. Thank you so much for doing that. So here in the longevity lifestyle, I'll start off with a little bit about what I believe. And what I believe is that life is a precious gift. My mom was 52 when she passed away. So she did not get the privilege of living a long life. She did live every day of her life to the fullest. And that's one thing that she gifted to my brothers and I, was the opportunity to really see that life is finite and that we get to live a long life of purpose and contribution. Americans, we find it hard to accept that life ends. There are so many people that do not want to talk about the fact that life ends at some point. There's a lot of us that are members of the death positive movement, which sounds so funny because who's positive about death? But there's a lot of us that we really realize that we have this finite period of time that we get to live our full lives, and that we do that with purpose and commitment and passion, and that we also do plan for our future, which does include death and dying. And we have conversations openly with our families about that. The other thing that I believe is that our elders are valuable assets in society. They hold our cultural and familial legacy and traditions, and so they should really be celebrated and revered every day that we have them around. You know, I hear some people will say, oh, I have to go to my mom's house, or I have to go visit my grandmother. And those of us that have had parents and grandparents die young, we wish that we could be able to go and visit them at some point. The other thing that I believe is that protecting, loving, and supporting our elders is a sacred role. And there is something that's really precious once you get out of all the logistics and the busyness of what that is, because serving as power of attorney, many people will spend, they could spend up to 20 to 25 hours a week supporting an older loved one. But once you get all of those logistics out of the way, and you really see the precious that this person has lived a nice long life, and their life is now coming to the natural end, to really be able to celebrate what it means to be able to support that person during those precious final years. And then serving as agent under power of attorney is a huge responsibility. So I know there'll be a lot of people that are on this webinar that are older adults themselves that are looking at downsizing and setting up estate sales. There's many families that will be doing that as well, and also many professionals in the industry. So I want to give a shout out to the professionals, especially for those that serve families, whether they're downsizing due to a death in the family, or they're downsizing just to make their life right-sized in their way. But I really want to give a shout out to all the professionals that are out there. And then elders, one thing that I've always believed is that our elders can show love to their families through the downsizing process and having their stuff in order. That's the last thing in your natural grieving when you're going through death and dying. There's the natural grieving process that takes place, but the last thing that you want to be doing is to have to go through all the stuff. So I think that's one way that we can really honor our families, is by clearing our stuff. So I just wanted to set the stage here for you with some of the things that I believe. What we're going to be talking about today is the longevity lifestyle and the 6 pillars of a good life. The first of those is purpose. The second of those is attitude. Third is lifelong learning. 4 is self-advocacy. 5 is community. And 6 is health. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so I can see all of you and all of your faces here. Oh, we're on a webinar format. I don't actually get to see everyone's faces, do I? Oh, but yeah, too bad here. But I'll get to see Heather here. So the first thing regarding a good life is having a purpose. I have so many of my clients. Heather mentioned that I have been an elder care consultant here for 10 years, and I do a lot of legacy life coaching. So I work with life coaching clients that are in their later life, usually in their 80s, 90s, and 100s. And what we do is really putting together a life that they want to live. What we see many times is that people in later life, they sort of lose their purpose, and they can lose their way in life. I find it very similar to what some people in their middle life lose as well, when the children are going off to school and you have the empty nest syndrome, and that can be very disorienting for some people. And so what I find is that purpose is really important. And many times we don't realize that we're lacking purpose until it's not there. And so I've always encouraged all of my clients and all of my friends, again, having a good life doesn't start in later life, it's all throughout our lives. But having a meaningful purpose that drives us forward, whether that's our family, our career, or a hobby, or some sort of charitable endeavor. And really the key to that is having a nice mix in our lives. So that's about having purpose. The next is attitude and having a positive outlook on life. What we found is that there's been lots of research that a positive attitude can actually help shape positive health. And many people have not put together, do not know about some of this research. And so having a positive outlook on life can affect how well our bodies are functioning, how well our brain is functioning. It also helps guide us with how we are living our lives, which many times could be engaging in physical activities, social activities that keep us engaged in life. So having that positive outlook on life is really important. I follow a gentleman named Dr. Joe Dispenza. And so he teaches us how to rewire our brains, because the neural pathways in our brains can be rewired into positive. It can also be rewired into negative conditioning. And so it's really important, if you're interested in any kind of brain health, to look and start to do some research and see if there's some gurus out there that you might want to follow as well. And the next is lifelong learning. Staying engaged in life and staying engaged in learning helps with our brain. Brain health, more and more, we've been doing so much research on brain health, and being actively engaged in learning new things, whether it's a new language, it's a new skill. A lot of people will do Sudoku and also crossword puzzles to keep their minds engaged, but there's so many other things that you can do as well. There's an organization that's called the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, or OLLI, 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 and they're in major cities and connected with universities, and they have lots of wonderful classes for older adults and lifelong learning, which is really, really important for people to keep their minds fired and to keep their energy going in a positive direction. What I also found is that there's so many things that are taking place in the world that it keeps us engaged with our kids and our grandkids. The more we stay engaged with either news, politics, which we, sometimes don't want to talk about with our families, but also with pop culture. I know a lot of my clients that love movies and love books are staying engaged with pop culture through book clubs and movie clubs, and really staying abreast of what's happening in the world. And that gives us conversation pieces to have with our family. So the next pillar of lifelong learning is something that I really believe in strongly, and it's called self-advocacy. And what I find is that a lot of older adults, they think that their planning for their future should come at a later time in life. And I always say that if we really want what's best for ourselves, that we will be engaged in our self-advocacy at a young age. And that starts at the age of 18. Anyone over the age of 18 should have power of attorney documents in place in case there would be any type of tragedy or accident, which they will need for someone to serve in their capacity if they're unable to for themselves. And so that's one thing that I think is really important, is that we start having these conversations young, at the age of 18 and over. And the reason why is I see so many families that go into so much conflict when their legal affairs are not in order. I also hear a lot of older adults that will say, oh, my oldest daughter, she's my power of attorney. But that's a verbal assignment. It has not been legally documented. That happens so many times. And the whole family knows that the oldest daughter will be serving as power of attorney. But when it comes down to legal capacity to be able to serve as agent under power of attorney, it needs to be documented, signed, and in many states, it needs to be notarized. So those documents are really important. The other thing about self-advocacy is to be able to write what your wishes are. And those are your wishes not only for your death, but also if you were to be infirmed in some way, to make sure that those are documented. And again, many people think that this is a negative conversation, but I think that this is a positive conversation, because not only does it set us up for advocating for ourselves and our wishes, but it sets our families up for success as well. So many times we have blended families and families that have may have some power struggles inside the family. They may have some dynamics in the family that have caused a rift in some way. And this is the most important way in documenting all of our wishes, that we can have everything laid out for our families, that they will be able to follow our instructions specifically. And the next pillar of having a good life is community. So one of the natural things that happens in life is as we get older, some of our friends and family may pass away. They may die, and so our world gets smaller. You often see many people in later life, they will also stop driving in the evening, so they'll be missing out on evening activities. And then you also see people, the regular things that have always been so important to them, like going to church or synagogue on the weekends, that is stopped a little bit, or that they always held. We mentioned book club earlier, or going to the movies, and you'll start to see people's worlds get smaller and smaller as their life changes. And this is one thing that I always encourage families, is to be able to jump in to see where you might be able to help facilitate those same activities taking place, or to create community around your loved ones in a different way, because that active engagement and staying engaged in the world is really important for our mental clarity. Also we talked about attitude and those connections that we have with other people. That community around us is really important. So I think that was one of the questions in the poll, was what is the quality or the health of your community? And that's something really important. I am what they call a solo ager. So I am not married, and I don't have children, and I don't have significant family that live around me. And so I am a solo ager in the world. So I've had to make throughout my life a very concerted effort in building community around me. It's one of the biggest skills that I've had to learn over time. So I've built relationships with neighbors. I build friendships with younger people. And I also have friendships through my professional involvement. And those relationships are really important to me, because one thing that I hear for older adults, one of the things that they struggle with most is their loneliness. And that's one thing that's sort of my biggest fear, is that I don't want to be in my home and lonely. There are times when life does get lonely, and I make sure to stay actively engaged in my community and with my family of choice. And the next thing, and the last thing, it's number 6, is health. And health is really important. And I consider health your physical health, but I also look at this as your spiritual health, your mental health, and also financial health. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those. I'll start with the financial health first. So this is something that financial education is so key for people in their younger years, to understand about compounding interest, and also about savings, and to be able to understand what long-term care costs in your future years. Many people, when they're younger, they're thinking about taking out their student loans and paying off student loans, or maybe they're thinking about buying their first home, maybe providing for children. That's usually where younger people are focused. And I think it's really important and healthy for us to look at the whole lifespan, and to be able to do financial planning for that entire lifespan and what that will look at. I find that by doing financial education with younger people, some people will make different decisions. Other people are going to make their decisions, how they are, and live their life to the fullest, no matter what that is. And then other people may, by this financial education, choose to make decisions a little bit differently. The next thing that's really important is mental health. We hear a lot more about mental health in the news, and this is sort of tied to that attitude. As we age, our brains do change. And so many times through brain change, you might see a clinical depression that comes into play. And so a lot of older adults think that mental illness has to do or mental health has to do with mental illness, and it isn't necessarily an illness. It's just the way our brains are changing, and there are medical interventions that sometimes people need. And so I think taking away the stigma and the stereotype from that is really helpful. And for us to see as younger folks, when we see ourselves going into any type of mental health crisis, that we make sure that we're getting early intervention, and especially for those around us to understand that mental health is a really important part of life. And the next is spiritual health. And so there are people that are atheist and agnostic that don't believe and have a spiritual component to life. But for most people, they do. And so making sure that that spiritual health is, and that spiritual relationship is nurtured is also really important and overall part of health. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again. So for any of you that are taking notes, that you'll be able to see the 6 pillars again. We talked about purpose, attitude, lifelong learning, self-advocacy, community, and health. And so we're going to go into the question and answer section of our webinar here, but I just wanted to let you know, one of the questions that always comes about is what do I do? What is my company? And the primary services that I provide coaching for those agents who will serve as power of attorney. I call it power of attorney readiness coaching. So how do you become ready and understand the things in later life that you'll be called to do to serve as agent under power of attorney for a loved one? The other thing I mentioned earlier is I do legacy life coaching. So working with people. This is why working with MaxSold is really exciting for me today, because one of the things we talk about in leaving a legacy for our family is making sure that we have downsized and that all of our belongings are in great order, and everything is cleared out for themselves, one, to enjoy their home, but also for our loved ones, to make sure that we're preparing them for not having a mess at the end of life. And then I do referrals nationwide. I'm connected with the Society for Certified Senior Advisors, and I do referrals for people looking for senior living placement, for financial advisors, for attorneys nationwide. And then I do keynote speaking and workshop facilitation. So one thing I want to say for the Q&A is that all the questions are important and welcome. I would hope that people would focus on the heart of the matter of their question to provide for everyone's questions to be answered. Hopefully we'll have some of those in the chat. And then also to be respectful for your family members' privacy. If you have any questions about elder care consulting or about the home and downsizing, that we make sure that we're respecting their privacy, because this will be shared on the World Wide Web, on the internet, on Facebook. So we want to make sure that their privacy is protected as well. So Heather, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn everything over to you, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Kelly. And just to remind everybody, I think I forgot that reminder in the beginning, anything that you submit question-wise in the chat and in the Facebook thread, I will be asking Kelly now. So you're welcome to do that. I do have a few questions. One is, can you explain what certified as senior advisor means and who would hold that credential?
Oh, that's such a wonderful question. I love the Society for Certified Senior Advisors, and people that hold the certification, they can be from any wide range of professions. So we have people that are senior living placement agents. We have real estate agents. We even have people that are in the service industry, whether they are electricians or plumbers or any kind of service organization that provides any kind of service to older adults. When you are a certified senior advisor, you are a professional in aging. And so what people are finding is that the way we work with older adults, it's really important to know sort of the social dynamics that are going on, maybe some of the financial and legal dynamics that are going on with a family. And so we have a wonderful education. It's actually pretty hard to pass. You study for quite some time, and then you take the course, and then you're a certified senior advisor. And like I said, I'm connected with the society. I'm the editor of the journal that we publish. And we also have a directory for resources all throughout the country. So if anyone is looking for a resource, any certified senior advisor would be able to help them.
Okay, excellent. And then you mentioned mental health. And one question is, what would be some signs to look for with an older family member that could be struggling, and how would you go about trying to help them?
This is such a great question. And for those who are watching this webinar in real time, the holidays are a great time to be able to notice any signs of a mental health change. What we typically tend to see, regardless of the season, what we typically start to see is change in personal appearance, whether that is in their dressing and grooming. You may see people that were always dressed to the nines start to give away a little bit and start to stay in their PJs and bathrobe a little bit more. Or someone that was always decked to the nines that maybe is at a 6 or a 7, you start to see a little bit of slip. You start to see changes in attitude and conversation. You start to see people disengage from the world in a lot of ways. And again, some of these things are not just for older adults. Many of these are for the people that are around us. And you start to hear conversations tend to go a little bit toward the negative, and people start withdrawing a little bit from life. And so the ways to find help for this is, one, to be able to have open conversations to see if this is someone just going through a little bad period of life, or this is truly a mental health issue that does need to be addressed by professionals. One thing, there are companies that do specialize in psychotherapy for older adults. There also are geropsychologists and also geriatrics psychiatrists that do specialize in mental health for older adults. And so I always encourage people to look for local resources. One of the best ways is to reach out to a primary care physician to see if they have any relationships with people and have clients that have had good results.
Okay, if there is a need to intervene or have a conversation and help, so I guess some of those intermediaries, I guess is the question, somebody that could help. I guess you just mentioned some of those people, but to have a conversation with a family member, is there a professional that can come into the home to help?
That's such a great question too. So thank you everyone for sending in all of these questions. There are care managers that are privately paid that can come into the home. There are also elder care consultants like myself that come in. I used to have families call me all the time to say, you need to do an intervention on my parents. And I would say, well, I don't really do interventions. But if you need to have a facilitated family conversation, if having family conversations isn't successful, let's come in and have a conversation in the family and talk about what the concerns are of the family members and just get a sense of where the older adult is. But there are many companies now that are doing home visits, which are really important. There's also another organization that I work with quite closely, and that is the Aging Life Care Association. They used to be called geriatric care managers, but now they're called Aging Life Care specialists, I believe. And so that organization, you can often find people that will be able to come in the home, those that have a specialty in psychiatry or psychology would be of the best benefit coming into the family. Many of them do have varied backgrounds, just like we do as certified senior advisors.
Okay. Another question is, what do you do if you need to take away access to a vehicle? Like if somebody shouldn't be driving, how do you approach that with your parents?
Yes, this one, I get this question almost every single time that I speak, and this is one of the most difficult conversations. And I believe the conversation needs to happen earlier to be able to find out early on when someone believes that they should not have the keys. And so this is something that, like I said, it should happen much earlier in life than at the time of crisis. And I always encourage families to have a conversation. There's something called National Healthcare Decisions Day that takes place on April 16th every single day or every single year. And that's really important to be able to have conversations to review your powers of attorney, to review your healthcare directive, to review any beneficiary statements that have changed. This is also a great time to talk about the car and how long does someone feel that they would be competent in driving, and just get their viewpoint on that. When it comes to actually taking away the keys, I always say that this is a great time to bring your primary care physician into the conversation. Always having a third party when you have to deliver bad news, having that third party is so helpful, because it isn't like your kids are taking away your keys. It's the doctor feels like your reflexes are not as sharp, your decision making may not be as sharp, and to be able to blame it on the doctor. If someone is having cognitive impairment, another way is to also get a letter from the doctor so that you can reference a third party document, and you'll be able to say, now remember, your doctor said that, she doesn't want you to drive at night, or he doesn't think that you should be driving at all. And let's pull out that letter and look at that letter and have the older adult call the doctor to have that conversation. I have known families that will disengage a battery and that will happen to have the keys disappear. But there's some smart people out there that can call AAA to get the battery reconnected. I've seen that happen sometimes too. But that's one of the most difficult things. But having the conversation early is what's most important.
Okay. Another question. Can your power of health be from another country? Can they live out of the country? I don't know if you know.
So what happens when someone lives out of the country? So there's two different, when the older adult lives out of the country, and also when the agent serving as power of attorney lives out of the country. So the latter of those is very difficult in having a power of attorney that is out of the country. And I always say that this is the perfect time to be able to bring in a care manager who would be able to be on the ground, to be able to make decisions on behalf of the agent serving as power of attorney and also their loved one. When the older adult is out of the country, my best advice would be to see if there are care managers that are local to that country that would be able to make those decisions. But it does get really, really tricky. And that is a problem that we've seen a lot, because there are people who do live all over the world at this point, and Zoom and Facebook keep us all connected.
Another question is, if you could only focus on one of the pillars, which would you choose? Is there one that's more important, or where should you start maybe?
where could you start? Mine would be with attitude and also mental health. I think that's one of the most important things, because having the right attitude about life, you'll find that you have the energy, that you'll be able to engage in all of the other pillars more. You'll be able to have the right attitude to be able to make relationships. You'll be able to find purpose. You'll be able to look at your finances differently. You'll be able to advocate for yourself differently. So really that mental health and that positive attitude about life are the most important ones.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to see if we have any other questions that came through. Oh, solo agers. You were talking about solo agers and question about having family far away. So what happens when you need to do something and you need help and the family is very far away? Should you rely on the people that you have built a community with, or what can your expectations be with that family so far away?
This is such a great question. And we have in the solo aging community, we have these conversations quite often. I will say they used to call us elder orphans, and I just don't like that term at all. It doesn't make me feel empowered and wanting to advocate for myself in any way. The term itself creates an isolation. I like solo ager because it gives me a little bit of oomph, like I'm doing something and foraging something that's new. I just like that a lot. So to your question about who do you rely on? So there's people in community that are friends that will be glad to help out at any time. They're neighbors that will be glad to help out anytime as well. What I think that the really important part of this is to look at when our helpful neighbors and our helpful friends are being leaned on as caregivers and providing care. And this is the really important piece, to be able to advocate for yourself, to decide what who is going to be involved in that intimate care of your life. And having, again, everything is about conversation, having these conversations early, where if I need 20 hours of care and of help every single week, with someone taking me to and from the doctor's office, making sure I get my groceries, that my meals are prepared, that is going to be a different conversation than someone that was going to bring over a casserole when you're sick. And so really having those conversations with people about what role do they want to provide and what role do they want to serve in your community and in your family of choice is really important. It's also important in a nuclear family, because there may be loved ones that just do not have the time or the capacity to be able to serve and to help people that even have nuclear families. So again, I can't say enough, learning the skill of how to have really tough conversations with the people in your family, in your community, in your friend group are really important.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Kelly. I think that is it for the questions, and thank you everybody that has attended on Facebook and Zoom. This will be a recording that's available later today on MaxSold's Facebook page. So, and anybody that wants to have me email it to them, I will right now quickly put my email in the chat, and please do reach out. And Kelly, do you want to share one more time, or tell everybody how they can reach you if they would like more information about legacy life coaching or other follow-up questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. My email is Kelly, Kelly, at Senior Care Kelly, all spelled out, Kelly at seniorcarekelly.com. And my web address is Kelly O'Connor, spelled with an OR at the end, kellyo'connor.com.
Okay, perfect. Those are in the chat. And thank you again, Kelly, so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time and the information that you've shared. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.